Originally, when I wrote this script, I was exploring the meaning of personal sovereignty, and it was going to be exceptionally longer than the current version you're watching right now. What I had before was basically a play-by-play of the entire movie and what it meant symbolically at every turn, but really, as many of these videos seem to point out, is that a lot of what I wrote down was mainly for my own understanding at first, and I decided to kind of go back and reevaluate. But that wasn't what I wanted to share, and not why I waited so long to create another video. These videos that break down movies are meant to show a story that might be hidden inside that maybe wasn't intended, but that might have a significant impact on how we live in the world and how we understand it, at least from my perspective. By no means am I a psychologist or anything like that, but I do enjoy a bit of theorization. I know this movie isn't considered a masterpiece, and honestly, it doesn't need to be. A story doesn't have to be perfect for you to find a deep personal connection to it, or to find a piece of truth inside it that helps you survive. Eventually, I'd love to see other people do videos where they break down their lives in a similar way. I think that would be a really beautiful way to get to know one another and build a better world like the alien video I created and their corporations in those worlds would like you to believe they are building. So without further delay, let's get into the breakdown of Eragon and begin by asking ourselves what it means to have personal sovereignty. First, let's talk about what personal sovereignty means, just so that we have a solid definition to start with. I tried to look up a definitive definition, but upon some research, it seems to be a set of words that are highly contentious, especially because of its spiritual and political associations and because of the nature of it being completely dependent on the individual to understand what that means for them. To me, the definition of personal sovereignty means that I know who I am in my mind, my heart, and my soul, and that I have the power to shape who I become and who I am going to be, but within the constraints of harm and help. So basically, living my life as harmless as possible, but being able to defend that as best I can without doing too much harm to others, with the boundaries I may put up, but also focusing on what I can and cannot control and separating those out for myself. We need personal sovereignty because it allows us to understand ourselves first before we can interact and make a meaningful impact on the world. It reminds me of this quote I found recently from Little Gidding by T.S. Eliot. Quote, "This is the use of memory for liberation, not less of love, but expanding, of love beyond desire, and so liberation from the future as well as the past." Once we understand ourselves, we begin to understand other people and what they may be going through, using comparative experiences or examples from any form of art that can accurately capture the feeling someone is trying to convey, like what I'm doing here with my favorite films. Dragons can be found in all types of cultures around the world. Sometimes the kid in all of us wish that there were actual signs of actual dragons, but to me they represent a complete sense of both sides of life at the same time. A creature so fantastical that you can only see it in the movies and never in real life, but it's just a lot less obvious imagery than we're used to. We can only really see dragons in the things they represent, like luck, wealth, greed, power, wisdom, or hatred. But what I see is our human potential given an ultimate archetype that reflects whichever aspect you like the most, which, to me, is what you need to work on personally. If we really only like dragons because they're big, scary, cool lizards that breathe fire, maybe you have some control issues, or you need to work on something related to that, since it's really a very personal thing to uncover about yourself when it comes to your relationship with an archetype like this. I personally see dragons as archetypes made of all elements. Fire for truth and light, and how truth sometimes hurts, but it illuminates what had to be burned away for us to heal and move forward, much like cauterizing a wound. Air, because of dragons being able to see from higher perspectives of their own accord and without needing to use an airplane or a jet to see from a higher perspective of how life could be versus what it is right now, and it can see how to get there. Just like the spell Eragon uses to see through Saphira's eyes while flying for the first time. bringing a brighter world into consciousness to see the world in a new, colorful lens. Earth because dragons are creatures that can surf the higher perspectives and the ones that others are currently at, a connection between earth and heaven, if you will. Water because of the emotional mastery and wisdom that dragons can represent, and spirit because of that unbelievable creation that they are, but also because of accountability and thought. The idea that taking accountability for your own actions and leaving the world in a better place than others would have when your time here is done. Similar to the dragon from Dragonheart, named Draco. He gave his heart to the wrong person and realized the effects of it and needed to fix it before he, the last dragon, dies so that he didn't lose his soul in the afterlife because of the choices that he made. Dragons represent those fears and hopes all in one. It's the archetypal representation of what duality means, but also what it means to remember your multifaceted nature and intrinsic worth and wisdom you already carry inside you. It's just that you haven't found it yet. It reminds me of the video I watched a little while ago talking about dragons in the Bible. Again, as I've said in previous videos, I'm more spiritual than a believer in any one religion, so this is an interpretation of this, not an exact thing. But the video by the Bible Project talks about dragons, and I'll link it in the description if you're curious. It's a really short video, but it might explain some of the concepts I'm talking about here too. The quote was,
"Be careful, because the power of the dragon is strangely appealing. A dragon slayer can be enticed to use the dragon's power."
And so become a dragon themselves.
Right.
To me, this is a symbolic take to say that depending on how you use your understanding of yourself is knowing how someone like that would think of controlling you and countering that with your own sovereignty and your own empathy. Again, I'm not religious, but to me that reminds me of something I saw in the YouTube comment section on that video, where someone said Matthew 10:16, "Be wise as serpents, but innocent as doves." So a dragon without a rider is someone like Galbatorix or any real world comparison you can think of, and Eragon as a rider with the bond of a dragon, representing that person who understands how someone like this thinks, how they likely got to that point, and does his best to fight that in whatever way that he can. First, I wanted to talk about what Eragon represents as a character in this universe. To me, Eragon represents that version of us that is just going about the world, doing as we're told, learning, having fun, trying to be independent from our peers, making our own marks in the world the best we can, etc. But his role was fixed for him. He already knew that the world worked a certain way and that it was going to be nearly impossible to escape it. Or was it? Eragon could be, and often is, categorized as a coming-of-age story. Yes, he understands that he will have to grow up one day, as his uncle points out, after he learns that Roran is leaving to avoid being drafted into the Empire's ranks. But the idea that it stops at his character alone, to me, is a bit of a surface-level thought. Eragon reflects the life of the author, in my opinion. Considering what I learned while writing the first draft of this video, it's not surprising that Eragon was written the way that it was. And I personally think that is only partly why dragon writing as a subject in fantasy is so intriguing. Paolini was just becoming who he was as he wrote this story. He became a famous author and wrote amazing books. He became who he wanted to become because he was surrounded by people who supported him. But what if he wasn't? Well, that's what we'll focus on here in regards to what Eragon faces. The next portion I wanted to speak about was the forces in the story that Eragon has to face. A lot of the time, we have outside forces making it difficult for us to grow up easier on a lot of different scales, socially, emotionally, mentally, physically, etc. All the different elemental ways we navigate life, which is represented by the shade, Durza, and his minions along with the tyrant, Galbatorix, who represents that wider scale. He has to face the world's shadow and his own. He has to see that life is messy and that there are no clear answers, but that he has to fight for what he believes in and that he has the power to change, and so do other people. He realizes that through Saphira, Of course, she is young physically, but the magic and knowing of the world is already there inside her, which we'll get into what Saphira and all dragons in the story represent. The idea that he is the only one left to fight these shadows in a meaningful way makes me personally think that it's symbolic of fighting that doubt or negativity on a personal level in order to fight that on a larger scale. Which is why I personally think that propaganda works so well. And it reminds me of the video that I made on A Knight's Tale, which goes over this exact thing specifically. To put it simply, people tell lies and ask you not to look into it and take their word for it. And when you do that, you lose more than just your thoughts on the matter, whatever it might be. At least that's my theory anyway. What I've said in a previous video regarding rattlesnakes on my TikTok, which you should check out by the way, in which I said that simple answers to complicated questions lead to dangerous outcomes. And I 100% believe that. And the amazing yet terrible thing is that it works both ways. It works when it comes to the bad guy, quote unquote, and when it happens on the good guy's side, quote unquote. Trusting simple answers outright without understanding is asking for corruption/trouble. It takes away your freedoms. It cages your thoughts and doesn't allow you to explore beyond those bounds in a meaningful way that helps both you and the people around you when you have an understanding of how you work on all levels and what you're doing to change that if you don't like what you found, and find how you connect to everyone else around you on different levels. When you fight your shadow, or in this case, a shade, and its remnants that show up in different ways culturally as well as individually, you're fighting for truth and fairness. The shade or the shadow, whichever you prefer, isn't an enemy, it's a mirror. It forces you to see exactly what you need to change, but in a way that keeps you stunted, because what is a shade? What is that shadow really? Why did Durza let himself become, quote, inhabited by spirits, unquote, in the first place? Not literally, obviously, because to me this is a completely symbolic thing, even in the real world. I'm not a religious person, for one, like I said, and don't believe in actual demons, at least not the way that most people would envision it. To me, Durza represents that person who let the world make them into who they are. They let people into their mind and heart, but those people or groups tear them up on the inside. Slowly, and sometimes intentionally, they project hostility outward because they're terrified of what's inside. It's why so many of the loudest voices preaching control and conformity are usually the ones hiding their own truths in the dark. Because when you're taught that your authentic self is dangerous, pretending to be the shade feels like the only way to be safe. Think about how Durza creates that shadow dragon in the battle for the Varden. He doesn't create it out of nowhere. He takes Saphira's fire, her authentic energy and truth, and pulls out the opposite, or a gross misrepresentation of what it represents, and turns it into smoke and shadow. That's exactly how lies and propaganda work in the real world. Bad actors rarely invent control out of nothing. They co-opt genuine human passions, fears, and truths, twisting them into blinding smoke and turn them back on us. They use the energy of our own fire to choke us out and make us fear the truth and feel safe with a lie. And that is why Durza is so dangerous. He isn't just an evil sorcerer. He's a tragic warning of what happens when you give up on your personal sovereignty to survive. If you let people think for you, it limits you to what they want you to do or say, especially if you're around people that don't care about you or who are in groups that literally hate you because of a different skin tone or your sexuality or gender, just to give you a few large-scale examples, when a lot of what we do as humans is completely made up and apparently agreed upon decisions socially. If you think about it in realistic terms, it's the person who doesn't know who they are or are too afraid to be their true selves to the point that they will defend the status quo, even to their own detriment, and oftentimes aren't able to see how it's affecting them and other people. All they know is that they feel safe under those conditions, which is crazy to think about in a logical manner. Take that propaganda option, for example. On that larger end of the scale, doesn't it make sense that if we think about propaganda as a huge lie, no matter where it's coming from, wouldn't it make sense to ask why it's being said in the first place, and what does that person gain from it, or what that system gains from it? From there, it reveals answers that people might not be comfortable within themselves or others after uncovering them. which is the complete opposite of what Saphira represents. Now for the best part of all, and the part I was most excited to speak on, was Saphira and all dragons in this universe. Let's start with her coloration and what the color blue means symbolically. According to dunedwards.com, quote, blue is often described as calm, trustworthy, and universally appealing, at once soothing and peaceful, while also giving the impression of authority. Blue is widely versatile and ideal in most design styles. Dun Edwards even named Wild Blue Yonder as the 2021 color of the year as a symbol of integrity, transparency, and authority. But in spiritual symbolism, it has associations with the throat chakra, aka Vishuddha, I think that's how you say it, in some spiritual practices. Its function is associated with communication, speaking, listening, purification, creativity, authentic self-expression, and body language, among other associations. In symbolism alone, blue represents trust, loyalty, healing, sincerity, wisdom, confidence, stability, faith, health, tranquility, softness, the power of intellect, and adaptability. It also symbolizes open spaces, freedom, intuition, and the depths of consciousness. So symbolically, in this film, Eragon is using his voice and personal power to defend the Varden, protect freedom, protecting the trees of the entire forest, if you put it another way, trying to protect people in a forest of fear and chaos. The language Paolini used, which I believe was inspired by Norse and Celtic languages, based on my own research, it looks like the word Varden might mean protectors or shielders, according to the Fandom Wiki article I found on them. The full quote being, quote, Varden can be more explicitly and appropriately interpreted to mean shielders, protectors, defenders, or in other similar terms. The root word Varden is also found in Duveldenvarden, the name of the elves' sacred forest, in which the fair folk withdrew after Galbatorix's takeover of Alliasia and the fall of Illyria, later named Urubane. So realistically, the color blue means to defend the good and the truth. Isn't that interesting that you can find similar meanings no matter what you believe? That connecting core of truth in all of them is visible in stories, in my opinion. Saphira represents that uncaged version of ourselves, the absolute best or worst version of ourselves. As represented by Shuriken, Galbatorix's new force-bonded dragon, he represents the complete opposite version of Saphira. In the case of her bond with Eragon, it shows how mentally expansive Eragon could become, considering the bond allows for telepathic communication. To me, that's symbolic of that potential for good. You understand how someone could use that power for bad intentions, but you choose not to do it yourself because you realize how that impacts yourself and the world around you. You've made it personal in a way that is freeing, not in a way that makes you feel like you have to save the world. That wouldn't be possible anyway. I think that is partly why Shuriken represents that opposite of Saphira. To me, he represents the person who either manipulates people to their own gain because they believe they are the smartest or the most important and create a situation in the world that puts everyone in danger in multiple ways, or someone who thinks that total domination, no matter the cost, is the only way to survive, and so they feel like they have to control everyone and everything around them in some form or fashion. To me, Shuriken and Galbatorix represent what happens when someone's worldview becomes entirely consumed by the need for control. It reminds me of political figures and authority figures throughout history who come to believe that total domination is the only way to survive, unaware or uncaring of the destruction it causes. It reminds me of what Brom said to Eragon after the first encounter in the Water Village regarding magic.
Magic must be your last resort. It has rules, it has limitations. Before you cast a spell, you must learn the ancient language of the elves. Brisinga. Brisinga means fire, is fire. The thing is the word. Know the word, and you control the thing. Before you can cast a spell, you must have the physical strength to withstand its effect. Some spells may leave you weakened. Other spells, as you found out on the bridge, can leave you unconscious. And yet other spells, if you use them before you're ready, will kill you. I can teach you the words, the limit of your strength, You must learn for yourself.
To me, there's a ton of truth to that. I personally believe that is why I was such a quiet person all of my life. Words have power and can inflict harm or healing, which is why I personally feel like I love fantasy the most. It gives representation to the way that I view the world symbolically. For example, if someone says that they're feeling terrible about the world and themselves via depression, to me that is a sign that they don't have anyone around them that understands the depth to which they understand the world and themselves, and feel powerless to change it for anyone, especially themselves. With too much knowledge or too much outside influence, it definitely can kill you, as I and many others around the world have all too well understood on a personal level and in my immediate family. To me, that overwhelm, feeling like you see the darkness of the world clearly but have no power to change it, is a deeply dangerous place to be. It's a level of pain and isolation that can make existing feel impossible, especially when you don't have a community around you to remind you of the good. No other dragon riders to help you see clearly again. It reminds me of a song by one of my favorite bands called Apocalyptica called I Don't Care. The lyrics, if you listen to it and read it at the same time at the surface level, to me shows an issue perhaps in a relationship where the person has tried to get someone to see their humanity in the relationship and their autonomy, but they don't and end up just numbing out to protect themselves. On the other deeper level, it could also be viewed on a systemic level for mental health crisis, which is where Galbatorix comes in. Where people in pain might numb out or feel completely crushed by that isolation, Galbatorix is the destructive opposite. Instead of retreating, he turned his unhealed pain outward to force the rest of the world into submission. Based on my memory and some quick Google searches, Galbatorix lost his first dragon to Urgals, which coincidentally end up doing his bidding later, which I think is interesting in itself because the thematic exploration of this video, which to me symbolizes the opposite relationship, that his trauma and unwillingness to deal with emotional turmoil are controlling him despite him thinking he is in control, but it isn't actually in control. That's beside the point. So what had happened was that the Dragon Rider Council basically said he couldn't have another dragon because he was unstable. Understandably so. He lost a bond that was rare, a level of power that many people probably would have killed for in that universe. That kind of trauma of losing someone so dear to you that it ends up ruling you and guiding every decision thereafter. But because of the pain and the hurt and not understanding why he was denied and possibly even not caring to understand, he affected the entire world because of his need to control and get revenge and killing other dragon riders to be in total control, including the language, which is where a lot of authoritarian governments come from, in my opinion. Why do they feel the need to control the narrative so much that they need to contort the way that people remember the past? To maintain control. To maintain that status quo was always a certain way, when in fact it was not always that way. Despite the movie never having shown Galbatorix very much at all, Galbatorix says in the last book this: Galbatorix's gaze grew more intense. The answer must be obvious to you now, Elfling. It has taken me most of the past century, but at long last I have found what I was searching for, a means of governing the spellcasters of Allegatia. The search was not easy. Most men would have given up in frustration, or if they had the required patience, fear. But not I. I persisted, and through my study, I discovered what I had for so long desired. A tablet written in another land and another age, by hands that were neither elf nor dwarf, nor human nor Urgal. And upon that tablet, there was scribed a certain word, a name that magicians throughout the ages have hunted for, with nothing but bitter disappointment as their reward. Galbatorix lifted a finger. The name of all names. The name of the ancient language. Unquote. He basically wanted to find a way to control everyone without anyone else having any true power. Sounds nationalist and authoritarian to me, but someone like this in the real world would use the word globalist as the alternative and paint it as a bad thing when you don't understand what it means. Like working with other nations, sharing cultures, and other items of connection that would connect us closer together without becoming one world order like in Star Wars that is represented by the Empire, or in this case, the Empire of Galbatorix. That's just my theory anyway. To put it simply, Shuriken and Galbatorix represent that large end of the scale of corruption, and using the information they intuitively can only see the shadow of in life, see that as the only way to live. That bond between Saphira and Eragon can possibly represent softening to change, or softening rigid worldviews, making the mind a bit more understanding, or at least curious about things they don't fully understand. Whereas Shuriken and Galbatorix represent that person who does the opposite, creates rigid understanding and destruction of safety for others for the benefit of no one but themselves. It's the idea that Eragon and Saphira represent partnership rather than domination, like Galbatorix and Shuriken seek. Despite not being religious, I wanted to reiterate the quote about dragons in the Bible.
Because the power of the dragon is strangely appealing. A dragon slayer can be enticed to use the dragon's power.
And so become a dragon themselves.
Right.
I mentioned this not to cause any drama or say religion is right or wrong, but to show that symbolism is how we understand the world best. But somewhere along the way, there are those of us who are dragon riders who basically fell victim to becoming someone who uses that power of their own dragon bond to manipulate the world, causing generations of confusion and misinformation, causing people to be stuck in cycles or, quote, lies that they would otherwise be able to find their way out of. So basically, dragons in this universe, and most likely many other dragon rider universes in literature and film, seem to represent the magic of the human mind, the peak of human innovation, and what that might bring if we can understand how to better help those who feel like control is the only answer. Brom represents that person who lost their dragon, their sovereignty, their personal sovereignty, their sense of self and personal power, but still has their intellect intact. Someone who could have become someone like Galbatorix, but actively chose not to. Brom, as stated in the movie, lost his dragon to another rider, and by choosing to kill that rider, he ended the dragon riders as a whole, leaving Galbatorix the only living dragon rider to rule over the entire kingdom. He lives on the margins, resisting Galbatorix's reign in quiet ways, and keeping the old stories alive even when speaking them could cost him his life. He carries the weight of a fight he couldn't win alone, forced to surrender to the reality that he couldn't change the world by himself. That person who tried to fight long ago, but unable to now do anything about it. That's where we take up that mantle, that responsibility to make the world a better place for people who are not the norm, so that we can all live a more balanced life. Because no one is free until everyone is free to be themselves. Brom represents that mentor or that person or that group that we look up to that helps us view life differently, just enough to feel supported and understood. Brom took it upon himself to show Eragon the true ways of what it means to be a dragon rider, and why he was so furious when he tried to fight the Razak in the forest and ended up getting Saphira injured. After which it was revealed of the personal cost and shame that he carried, that he too was a dragon rider before and feels responsible for how life is now. Not that all those who fought in the past feel responsible for life right now, nor should they, but that there can only be so much done before you burn yourself out. I think that is a main reason that I was such a quiet kid, like I mentioned before. But the reason is also to learn from others as best I could until I could defend myself with the support of a community, like Eragon had with the Varden and what Eragon represented for Brom. Community is the reason we can fight at all.
When will the lesson be learned? When will the lesson be learned? How many more dictators must be wooed, appeased, good God, given him mixed privileges, before we learn? You cannot reason with a tiger when your head is in its mouth!
As a recent TikTok sound that has been running rampant on my For You page recently has been saying, just like the end fight between Saphira and the Shadow Dragon. Just like how I know that putting videos out like this talking about the trans experience in my own perspective may get me targeted, but I'm already targeted, just like Brom. Might as well go down swinging if I do. But I want to provide some hope and possibly a new perspective using my life and the movies I love like I'm doing now. That's what I'll leave behind as my legacy, something that people can ponder over and change their lives for the better, just as Brom did with Eragon. Lastly, I'd like to speak on something that this brings up. To me, Fascism is fundamentally a failure of internal sovereignty. Authoritarianism and extreme nationalism are just the larger societal symptoms of people refusing to do their own shadow work, choosing absolute external control because they fear what they don't understand inside themselves. They buy into the lie that complete compliance keeps them safe, oblivious to the fact that those systems always demand more sacrifices eventually. That's what Brom wants to fight against, the absolute downfall of personal freedoms and the world at large in this small universe. Just like I hear in the LGBT community, we've done a lot, but we still have a lot more work to do. And that doesn't just apply to the LGBT community or the trans community specifically alone. All this to say that I personally believe this movie is the peak of what it means to be someone who lives and breathes truth. Someone who knows that lying helps no one but yourself. Even if it's just a white lie about your significant other asking if everything looks okay in a new dress or suit or whatever. It does people a disservice to not be yourself and think for yourself. It doesn't allow people to reflect back to you the thought process or energy that you're giving out. It also reminds me of the stories in Norse mythology, the world serpent, Jormungandr, I think that's how you say it. And stories like this, to me, are direct and yet complicated, often seemingly magical concepts that seem impossible, hence the fantasy genre label. But when looked at this way, to me, it represents humanity's greatest wish for peace, knowing that the negative aspects of life will always be there, but that there might be ways we can minimize it and that it will take lifetimes to understand. Generation through generation, choice by choice, we make the world we live in together, for better or worse. The battle at the end of the movie is just one example. One battle in time of the millennia-long search for balance in life, for one and for all. The scene where Eragon is trying to fight Durza and his shadow dragon shows what it feels like to be in the jaws of lies and being unable to do much about it other than speak your truth and try to appeal to their minds and logic, symbolized when Eragon stabs the beast in the head multiple times to get it to let go of Saphira. A lot of minorities, like trans people like myself, and immigrants are feeling exactly like this right now. When that doesn't work, you distance yourself, lick your wounds, and try to keep going. The vision that Eragon was using from Saphira during the fight symbolizes that sometimes it's difficult to see why you should keep living when everything seems out of control and you feel like you're the only one that can truly see what's happening for what it really is. And using your voice, your personal sovereignty to do something about it, even if you feel like you're screaming into the void. Even when shades like Durza, represented in real life, revel in our pain and agony, we still need to have a little compassion for them because it shows exactly where they are operating from. The power of shoving yourself inside a box for money, power, fake glory, and imperialist and nationalistic control only hurts you and those around you. Use the actions of those that hide in the shadows to show what harm they have done to themselves and others, and maybe even to you personally. Despite how many tower moments you have to weave through, use your personal sovereignty to drive your truth straight into the heart of those who want you dead, and shatter the smokescreen of the lies they built with it. Honor those that came before you that lost their battle because of outside forces, like Next Benedict, Brianna Gay, Sam Nordquist, and so many others. Not to mention those killed by ICE, most notably Alex Pretty and Renee Nicole Good. When I came out, I knew that I would have to be okay with dying on some level, some kind of horrific death, because as trans people, we can't just die in peace in old age, apparently. That's what the ending where Eragon saves Saphira's life shows to me. The lives lost and futures burnt out by hate, greed, fear, and the lust for power. But I do realize that I'm not alone in this. Our minds are in the fight. Many of ours are. Especially loud voices like Hassan Piker and others that speak publicly about larger issues. But it still applies to everyone on an individual level. Choosing yourself and the well-being of others is harder, but it is much more worth the effort than hurting yourself by smothering who you are under false pretense just to feel safe. Like in my other videos, don't live in fear like in Alien. Live like you know that you're worth every cent and trouble it was to keep living. That there is a reason you are here, alive, right now. Whatever you need that reason to be, let it be for joy, happiness, and peace. Not just for yourself, but for others to live their truths too, so long as it hurts no one. Just like in Interstellar, they found a way to get out of their hardship, even if it feels impossible right now. We can find connection through media to start seeing ourselves in each other. Fighting that good fight, like in my Knight's Tale breakdown. Fighting that inner critic and what the world tells you who they think you are, and try to control it, like Count Adamar. And being radically and with righteous fury, refusing to back down, like William. Never letting the world make you into the thing you fought so hard not to become, like Taka into Scar. But letting yourself acknowledge the hardship that you've already overcome and will still have to overcome, but that you aren't alone in it, ever. You just have to be willing to say and do something about it, like Eragon and Saphira. At least that's how I view the world. It reminds me of the quote at the end when Arya says,
"You lost those who were dear to you. You've paid a great price for your courage."
This is the painful cost of choosing authenticity, losing relationships to people close to you, comfort, and sometimes even safety in a world that isn't built for people like me. But I know that courage in the face of fear was the only way forward. But I knew that I would find my people eventually. And that's what really matters.